you went with Amanda?
Yeah. Yeah, I started it. Hi, everyone. We'll just wait for a few more people to join and then we can get started. Good to see everyone. I feel like we should have music. Hi, Libby.
Hello.
Thanks for coming.
No problem.
We'll just give it a couple more minutes while people join. All right, well, it's already 6:08. I think we can get started. My name is Councilwoman Amanda Sandoval, so thank you all for joining us. Do people from the West Highland Neighborhood Association want to introduce themselves next?
Sure, I'll go ahead and start. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming today for this virtual town hall. My name is Carl Barton. I'm a member of the West Highland Neighborhood Association, specifically the Land Use and Planning Committee, and I will be presenting this evening with Councilwoman Sandoval, and we hope for a good presentation and a good discussion, lots of questions.
Awesome.
Great. Hello, everybody. My name is Bill Hare. I'm Vice President of the West Highlands Neighborhood Association, and I'm on the Land Use and Planning Committee for the neighborhood, and I'm very excited about this project.
Libby, do you want to introduce yourself? Is there anyone else from the land use?
Can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
This is Joey Gargado, and you'll see me in a minute when I can get my screen working. You can count on me to struggle with that, but I'm a member of the Land Use and Planning Committee, and I was the one who was out handing out flyers on 32nd. If we have any business owners here or managers, I was the one who came in and introduced myself. So thanks for joining, and we look forward to the conversation.
Libby?
Great. I'm Libby Glick, and I'm with Denver's Community Planning and Development Department. So I'm happy to answer any questions on the zone district or the rezoning process.
Anyone else? Awesome. Nick, so Melissa, want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I am Melissa Horn. Apologize. Hi, I'm Melissa Horn. I'm the aide to Councilwoman Amanda Sandoval. I handle a lot of land use and policy issues for her.
Thank you. So Melissa's going to be running the slide deck. So Carl, if you just say next slide, she'll run the slide deck. Next slide, please. So just want to go over the agenda of what we're trying to do here. Nick, no problem. We're going to go over the background. We're going to identify what we think is the issue. We're going to talk about a proposal. We're going to talk about what a streetcar connection is or streetcar nodes. Benefits of what is called a design overlay. And the only reason it's called number 8, we're not trying to rezone to 8 stories, is it's the 8th design overlay in the city of Denver. We'll talk about outreach. We can talk about next steps, and then we can talk about Q&A. Next slide, please. So why are we here? When I got elected in 2019, it came to my attention from the Berkeley Regis United Neighbor, which is their registered neighborhood organization in the Berkeley neighborhood, that as the mixed-use corridors throughout our neighborhood were being redeveloped into 100% residential. So here's a photo of what used to be a hair salon and small retail along 46th and Tennyson. This is right next to Parizzi on the west side of Tennyson. So as redevelopment occurs, there's no requirement to have active floor ground use. So what I did was I worked with another registered neighborhood association on what's called the Active Centers and Corridors Design Overlay. And it doesn't mean 8, it just means it's the 8th design overlay. And we applied this overlay onto the whole entire length of Tennyson from 38th to 44th. We also applied this requirement on 51st and Lowell near Regis, where the Rocky Top is. We also applied it off of 38th between Yates and Sheridan. And also we applied it on the corners of 44th and Lowell, so all within the Berkeley neighborhood. And this overlay has also been used along East Colfax and also has been used on Santa Fe. So as redevelopment occurs, it requires 75% of the active street ground use to be replaced. So it can't be 100% residential as in this photo here. Next question. Next. So I think I pass it over to Carl now. Carl?
Yes, thank you. So, you know, as Councilwoman Sandoval mentioned, there's been this realization that that some of our vibrant, historic, small H historic commercial corridors have been changing, and as part of that change has been more and more residential only development. So that was noticed as mentioned, it was noticed in Regis, it was noticed in Berkeley, and of course, the potential for that was certainly noticed here in West Highland too, specifically as it relates to Highland Square. So this issue here about using the DO8, the design overlay, to address this is really about trying to be proactive. And as part of the charge of the Land Use and Planning Committee, looking out for these issues and really wanting to make sure that we preserve the commercial character of West 32nd Avenue. It's incredibly important. It's important for the corridor. It's important for the businesses there. And it's also very important, obviously, to all the residents of the neighborhood. So we currently on West 32nd in Highland Square do not have the kind of protections that are provided by the DO8. And so while this is really an issue of us trying to get out ahead of it, we're learning from the experience of some of the other neighborhoods. This is not in reaction to a specific proposal that's come across the city, come into CPD at all. This is about trying to be proactive to preserve Highland Square as the vibrant neighborhood center and attractant that it is. So we've been working along with the CPD and the Councilwoman's office to advance this issue, which is why we're all here this evening. So next slide. This is me too. So the proposal as it stands is to apply the DO8 overlay, the active centers and corridors overlay, to properties generally along West 32nd Avenue, not generally, just all along West 32nd Avenue, but not every property along West 32nd Avenue. It actually is those properties that are zoned UMS3 and UMX2. So those are highlighted on this map here, sort of in the middle there. We've got Mead Street is a break between where the properties are zoned UMS3 and UMX2. And the idea is that the overlay would apply just to these properties. Those are the properties that's important to continue to have and maintain that active street frontage that makes Highland Square so special. And it would not apply to properties outside of that. And it wouldn't apply to properties along the corridor along West 32nd that have PUD or single unit zoning or multi-unit zoning. It's really, the overlay is tailored to fit into those districts that already have a base zoning of MS or MX. A couple of really important points in here about what the DO8 does not do. It does not change the base zoning, does not change the allowed building height, does not change the allowed uses. And the other thing is this is not an issue where there's a retroactive application of zone standards. These only come into play when a property is redeveloped. And there are, some fairly significant properties along West 32nd Avenue that could be redeveloped. So again, this is really about being proactive to protect the character and the specialness of Highland Square. Next slide.
Thanks, Carl. So this map is what's called the Denver Streetcar Connection. And in Denver, we used to have a trolley system, and these are the lines along the trolley system. And what you would see is nodes like Tennyson, you would see 32nd Avenue and Lowell, Pearl Street, lots of different areas that had a trolley car and where you got mixed use and small local businesses, such as the fill of 32nd and Lowell, Tennyson in Denver. And there was a whole study done on the streetcar connection and how important it is to preserve Denver's historic streetcar system, and where we have these small commercial corridors within residential areas. And what it is in 2010, the zoning reflected in West Highland to maintain this area as well. So we have mixed use and what is MS or MX, mixed use, or we have an MS, Main Street, which is also mixed use. And what that means is the uses are mixed. You can have small Perfect Pedal, you could have Chipotle, you can have pizza, you can have coffee shops, but as redevelopment occurs, it's not required. Next slide. So what are the benefits of the Design Overlay 8? Why are we doing this? This, you'll notice, is a project that's along Tennyson. It's across the street from Cesar Chavez Park, kitty corner from the new Sweet Greens. What it did was, when this got redeveloped, is that bottom floor is all active street use. Sweet Greens is also another example. Sweet Greens could not have turned into anything other than active street use because of the corridor, because of the overlay. Call Your Mother is another example along Tennyson that is a new building that is also reflective of the character. We want to have small, thriving commercial corridors in areas that historically have had them, and to preserve that feel of the uniqueness of the north side of Northwest Denver. For those who might want to get a little bit more technical, it eliminates the drive-through form services and you go into a general building form. So those are real technical for landowners when you're talking about the redevelopment and what type of forms that you want to use. It prohibits parking, storage, warehousing, or primary accessory residential use. So if we are thinking, what is a primary accessory residential use? What does that even mean? That's those gyms at the bottom of an apartment that actually could be a community center, that could be a small coffee shop. You have to put those amenities, as much as we want those type of amenities, you don't want them on the active 75% of the street use. You want things that are open to the public and public facing, a post office, a dental office. What does it mean when no storage or warehouse? You can't have a storage use. You can't put utilities such as fire escapes on there. So it's all really wanting to have active use street frontage. So as if you all drive down Tennyson on the corner of 46th and Tennyson, that big project, it's about 3/4 of the block. 75% of that block, as it gets redeveloped into similar to this, will have small local businesses in there because it's required on this design overlay 8 that we did proactively. And then also it encourages preservation of existing structures. It can, or it can't. That's, it depends on the redevelopment, who owns the property, but it also gives a really good pedestrian feel. We want to have Denver walkable. We want to have Denver being able to roll however you get around. And we really want pedestrian-oriented redevelopment in these key corridors. Next slide. Carl.
Thanks.
Yep, thank you.
Yep, this is me again. So this is really the start of this journey. I did mention that clearly this had been something that had been identified for the lessons that we'd learned through other neighborhoods and what they were going through. And again, in the spirit of being proactive, the Land Use and Planning Committee, along with the Councilperson's Office and CPD, have been working on this in the idea of trying to formulate the idea that this is something that we think would probably be good for Highland Square. We think it'd be very crucial to make sure that as the square redevelops, that we're still seeing those buildings that have the storefront, a high level of windows in the front, that create that pedestrian environment, that are supportive of the local businesses, making sure that we have that and wanting to get out in front of that. So, in the background, Land Use and Planning Committee, West Highland Neighborhood Association, we've been discussing this for a while, but when it comes to really getting the ball rolling on this project and seeing what the level of support is and going through the process, we're really in the, at the very first stage of that. So way back in October of 23, we did send out a letter kind of introducing this concept. We did that at the time that we were trying to also formulate a program and a process for getting there. The Land Use and Planning Committee, as like all of WHNA, is a volunteer organization. So we're working on this in our spare time as we have a chance. So we started that in October of 23, and then in May, hopefully you would have seen Joey and his smiling face coming through your door to invite you to this town hall. So we are going to, and then again in May, we sent out the notification flyer as well to hopefully get people interested in coming in and hearing about this. So while DO8 itself is as an element of the Denver zoning code is pretty, I mean, it's established. It's in the code. You can go look at it and see what it says in specifics. The process for this neighborhood and applying it in West Highland is at a point where we're just beginning and really just reaching out to to the folks here that would be directly impacted. So here we are in phase one on this evening, which is to hopefully get some good feedback, answer questions. We can answer some very technical questions if you'd like. We've got a pretty deep grasp of what DO8 means on a very specific basis, so we can definitely do that. But really the idea here this evening was to lay out the issue, address what we think was a potential solution there, and then have the those directly impacted have a chance to give us their feedback. So I've covered some of the materials on the next slide, but I will go ahead and ask Melissa to move to it anyway. So there are a lot of next steps. I think that's the lesson, or the message, I should say, that we're trying to get out right now, is there's a lot of next steps, but we do think in our opinion that this is a really important thing for Highland Square. It's been demonstrated to be successful in other parts of the city, and we think it's pretty important. But so we're here this evening to start rolling it out. We want to build the contact list. We want to get your feedback. I'm hoping for some questions and things tonight. But I think the other main message is there's going to be lots of other opportunities to provide feedback, to talk to us, to talk to CPD, us being the Land Use and Planning Committee, to talk to CPD, to talk to the Councilwoman's office. There's plenty of more opportunities, both formal and informal, for that. So if your colleagues, neighbors who are not able to make it tonight, I would ask that you let them know what you heard tonight and start talking to them about it as well, so that we can really generate that robust feedback, because we do really, it is important to determine community interest on this. This does go through a specific approval process through the city and county of Denver. I know that Libby is probably here to be able to talk to that in detail, so I won't try. But there is that very technical approval process. But even before that, we want to make sure that if that is going to go forward, that we do have a robust level of community support in order to make everyone comfortable going forward. So you can look forward to next steps, further town halls, further presentations, even outside of the official public hearings that would accompany a zoning overlay such as this one. So that is the end of our formal presentation. We do have some technical information, or we just really hope for some comments, questions, and discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Melissa, you want to take down the slide deck? So thank you all. And as Carl mentioned, yes, we have a really good grasp. My office designed and created the overlay in partnership with CPD. So I wouldn't lead you astray. My representation really matters. And as Carl mentioned, I would be the applicant on behalf of the neighborhood to move this through the legislative process. It wouldn't cost, like financially, it doesn't cost the owners anything. I'm the applicant. I was the applicant on Tennyson, and I'm working on an application in 4 other neighborhoods, just east of Federal. We're working on where do we want to preserve these type of commercial nodes. So I'm very familiar with the application process and have done it, but the key is I need to make sure that all of the property owners and all of the people who would be impacted are wanting this to move forward. I don't want to force anything on anybody. I just know that I also at the same time want to be very proactive, because once redevelopment starts occurring, it's a cancer. It grows really fast if we don't be proactive. And these processes take time. The legislative process in a whole is about 9 months. The legislative process, I'm not including, as Carl mentioned, phase 1 outreach. That takes even longer. So these processes are slow moving, and just want to give a huge shout out to WHNA and the Land Use Committee and my staff, Melissa, and everybody who's part of the West Highland Neighborhood Association to even get us this far, because they have been steadfast in trying to move this forward in all, like they said, free time. They're all volunteers. They're not getting paid to do this. They're getting paid because they want to love and cherish their neighborhood. So with that, if anyone has any questions who's here, feel free to unmute or raise your hand and let's just have a conversation.
Hi there, this is Marshall.
Hi, Marshall.
And I did, Carl, receive and Joey the flyers in the mail. I'm a property owner. I'm not a merchant, but I appreciate being in the loop, and I'm here to learn about what this is about, and familiar with Councilwoman Sandoval's work on other overlay districts, and it's a good thing. So I guess I just wonder, from the group I see here, I'm not a merchant myself in the corridor, but I'm not necessarily seeing any merchants here and or a representative of the Merchants Association. I'm wondering, I mean, maybe it's an availability issue or it's early in the process, but I just was wondering what your thoughts might be on that.
I could start with that and then pass it to you, Carl. This is just the first step, is we wanted to just kind of put together our thoughts. This is the first time we put together a presentation, and Joey did flyering to the merchants, and Melissa from my office mailed to all of the property owners. So that's how you got that mailer. It's hard to get, it's interesting. It's hard to get people interested in this phase of the project because it's so wonky. It's usually once people hear more about it that the rezoning is happening, then everyone's like, oh, what's happening? Especially with like a name like DOA 8, everyone blows up and thinks that 32nd would be 8 stories. So it's usually reactive, and we're doing as much work as proactive as we can. I do know that we'd like to meet with the Merchants Association that Jenny Appel runs to get that information out, and we'll have to just do a little bit more concerted outreach to the property owners within the impacted area on the map that Carl was talking about. So it's just the first phase, Marshall, and I appreciate you coming. What I would ask from you is if you could tell any of the other owners that you know along this corridor about this, share this. We'll have a recording, and so we could have follow-up conversations. Carl, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, thank you. So I would just echo first. I would just want to echo what Councilman Sandoval said. Tell your neighbors. That is the best way. As a trusted property owner and neighbor, that goes a long way. We have had some reach out, some conversations with the Merchants Association. That work will continue to be ongoing, and it's always. While it is a challenge to reach out to everybody, and we'll never get everybody, we are definitely going to be trying very hard to do so. So that outreach has commenced and will continue. But yes, tell your neighbors, tell your friends, please.
And let me just say, and I apologize for not having a video. My video is not working. I may have dropped my laptop one too many times. So just to let you know, I'm not purposely,
No problem.
on the video. So.
Hey,
Well,
you guys, I wanted
Yeah.
to speak up really quick. Sorry, I'm having a hard time with the hand raising button. I'm on my phone. My name's Andrea West. I own Fire on the Mountain. We're a restaurant on the corner of 32nd and Newton, and I own that building as well. And I am admittedly not as active in the HMA as I used to be. Attentions are just elsewhere a little more than they used to be, but we are very committed to, maintaining the character of the neighborhood. Absolutely. This would be a priority for us. And I definitely know a number of other property owners. They're actually, are folks that own half of the block. As you go catty corner, up toward Osceola, there's some folks that, you could kind of loop in a couple of key people that would cover a decent number of the commercial properties, at least on kind of our side of the neighborhood, if you will. But I guess, can I ask a couple questions, or did somebody else have their hand up? Okay. I'm just curious, when you've seen this in the past, and I guess I don't have a sense of if you guys have done a proactive one of these yet, Councilwoman Sandoval. It sounds like you're working on one on the east side of Federal, but maybe more in that reactive space. Who is opposing these kinds of efforts generally, and how does that take shape generally?
So in Northwest Denver, we created it. I had a council aide who had her master's in urban planning, and she and I literally wrote the zoning code together. And it was reactive. But since the creation of it, my colleague, President Torres, and former Jolon Clark, they proactively applied it along the Santa Fe corridor from 3rd Avenue all the way to 11th. That has not redeveloped. That still has First Friday down there. They still want that fill. So it's been proactively placed in that corridor. And then 4 of my colleagues proactively, they did it a bit different on East Colfax from Colorado Boulevard to the border of Denver, like Yosemite. What they did there was they did nodes along, they didn't want 100% blanketed. They had, because it just doesn't work. East Colfax has more shallow lots, the land use is just different. So they created specific areas that had historically had commercial, and they proactively have done this on East Colfax. So everybody who has used this tool that I was able to implement and add to the Denver zoning code has done it proactively. I haven't been able to be as proactive with the use of it in the north side, because I've been working on accessory dwelling units and I'm almost done with my last neighborhood to rezone ADUs, and then I'll only have 300 doors. So now I'm coming back around and I want to be proactive. So those are the proactive ones. Who's coming out? I'll just be 100% honest with you. On Tennyson, it got really controversial at the very end because I stopped 8 developments from being 100% residential. And they weren't happy, and they had in concept, and I decided to go forward and make those 8 developments actually redo their projects, because that was the will of the people. And that's what I wanted, that's what I want. That's why I feel like you all elected me, is to do the will of the people. And it was, did I upset 8 developers? I did. Did I cost them money? I did. Do we have better developments like Sweet Green and the one that will go to next door to Monkey Fist, the tattoo shop on 41st? Will it be a better project? 100%. Was the Call Your Mother 100% better project? 100%. So in the end, it's hard to quantify for me as a council person because it's not my money. The people who react, it's usually the development. And so I'm really wanting to get in front of this on 32nd Avenue is I don't want that to happen. I want to get in front of permits that are being pulled and get the word out about this, that the neighborhood and my office are working in consultation with community planning and development who lead on this and from the city, and really be more proactive so we don't have that tension between the development community and our small local businesses, because it's cheaper to redevelop 100% residential because of the way that the performers work in Tabor, to be 100% honest with you. You know, you're a small local business, same as La Casita. You get taxed different than your house. You're full. I don't have to tell you anything about that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I figured it would probably be generally, developers in opposition. I guess in terms of the business community, like, I mean, you brought up Jenny as an example. She, is very active in the HMA, but definitely has sort of an interesting take on it as a realtor, right? Like she represents a business owner, but also residential home sales in the neighborhood. I'm wondering if it would be helpful to get like just truly a group of the folks who just own the properties in question. Like, is it worth it for us to just make a very specific effort to get those people in a room?
100%. If you could help me do that, I would absolutely love you. That's exactly what we need. I worked on this along Tennyson prior to COVID. So we were meeting at Vitamin Cottage. This corridor is a bit unique because there's some more out-of-state properties than there were on Tennyson. At the time I did that, we had a big, Jeff Laws owned a lot on Tennyson. My colleagues have had the same problems on East Colfax, even on Santa Fe, of how do we get property owners aware of this without like Chicken Little, the sky is falling, and look at it proactively, but none of these have ever been controversial. And in the end, everybody is really thrilled about we don't want this tool used everywhere in the city. It has to be strategically used. But yes, if you could help us get together those key individuals and owners, and same as you, Marshall, it would be really helpful. We could host it. We could find a place to host it and present this again, and do more Q&A of what are the benefits of this. Absolutely.
Cool. Yeah, I'd be happy to help you reach out to a number of those folks. And I know the HMA, you know, the tenor of a lot of those meetings is they worry that we have empty storefronts or that they, you know, like remain empty for a while in between tenants. And there's definitely a worry, I think, within the HMA that like, what if West Highlands becomes less of a destination for commercial and
Yeah.
you know, just,
And
Yeah.
I think that I hope it's not necessarily counterintuitive, but if you have these properties that when they get redeveloped are developed as 100% residential, I think maybe this is where your head was going, then West Highland becomes less of a destination. I mean, this is absolutely a situation where the sum is, what is that phrase? You know, that phrase is like the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And once a property that could contribute to the commercial vitality of Highland Square, which makes the entirety of West Highland desirable, once that's developed as full residential, that opportunity is gone.
Totally.
And that's why we're trying to be proactive.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. I think you could easily get buy-in just generally explaining it like that. I guess what I was saying is like people are sort of starting to feel the like pre-effects of that kind of phenomenon, you know, where it's like, and when we just have a long-term vacancy, it feels weird. We're like, what's happening? Is the neighborhood not cool anymore? You know, and then we all freak out, but it's not happening. And, you know, I don't worry about that in general, but I think having some very specific protections in place is an awesome way to do it. So thank you guys for bringing this to the table. I think generally just like in terms of creating a coalition around it, do you have, like, if there is opposition, what happens there if there are some really outspoken folks? Not that I would predict that there would be, but you know, like what is the sort of makeup of people that have to agree on this?
That's a great question. I usually want, as the applicant and as your elected official who will be carrying this forward on behalf of the neighborhood and the owners, I don't want 50% fighting against 50%. That does not feel good. Do I want most support? Yes. In when we did the opposition on Tennyson, was it 8 individual owners? No, it was not. It was one conglomerate that had 5 of the properties. So I was up against probably like 3 or 4 separate development groups. And I went to this group like West Highland neighborhood and I said, what do you all want? And I said, I'll take a hit, you know, but I'm willing to do that for Northwest Denver. And they were like, will you take the hit? And I said, absolutely. So those ones, but most of the time when I've talked to my colleagues, when they've been doing it proactively instead of reactively, like the tension we had on Tennyson, they've actually felt that there wasn't opposition. You had to explain it because of the drive-through form and get kind of like really planner and break it down to people who don't always speak that narrative. And what does it mean as redevelopment occurs? But most of the time, people can actually understand the importance of wanting these commercial corridors and these unique places saved. So if there were a couple outliers, I'm going to go forward with it. If there's tons of opposition, I don't want to ever take that to city council to a public hearing. It's so divisive. And it doesn't feel good to be the applicant of a very divisive and contentious rezoning that you feel like you're doing proactively for the neighborhood. And it doesn't appear that way at the public hearing in front of council because it's a very public process. These areas would have to have signs along them. So that's when we've worked on these before. You kind of take a straw poll, right? Of how many of the owners are really understanding this, who in that group who's supportive want to be more upfront on the property owners such as yourself or more upfront. And when I say upfront, meaning writing letters of support, showing up at public hearings, talking about the benefit of these historic commercial corridors, and some who want to take more of a backseat and just really like stay abreast, but not participate as much. Does that help answer? Carl, am I missing anything?
No, I know. I think the important part is what you mentioned is there are it goes a long way when there's some property owners who are vocally saying, we think this is a really good idea. This is in the best, and in our best interest and the neighborhood's best interest, because clearly your best interest and the neighborhood's best interests are, completely intertwined. So that's really important. It goes a really long way. And then I will say this, when Bill and Joey and I were really maybe just strategizing around this a long time ago, we were starting to get this kicked off. One of the things we wanted to do was to be able to gather that group of property owners to be that team to really move forward. And we really, I'll be frank, we really struggled with identifying who and how and all those things. We don't have the ins that it sounds like you have and your membership with the Merchants Association would have. So we would really appreciate your assistance.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. Sorry, Jerry, go ahead.
No, sorry to interrupt you, but to that point, we also wanted to make sure that we went about this in such a way that we invited everyone to the conversation. And then if the people that showed up to that conversation were excited about this, then that's great. And so, Andrea, we'd love to continue to work with you on that.
Yeah, that sounds great. It's an interesting mix at the Merchants Association. It's not often the people, I couldn't tell you right off the top of my head, but it's not often the people who own the buildings. It's usually just, the folks who are leasing those spaces. So they have a slightly different interest than someone who may,
That's been my experience with other merchants associations and with the West Highland Merchants Association. That's why my office manager, besides Joey, we wanted everybody because we want, people to buzz about it. The merchants for sure, but it's essential that we get the property owners in the room as well, and get the property owners such as yourself and Marshall talking and having these conversations, because ultimately that at the end of the day, it's the property, it's your property value. Oftentimes these properties are some of your biggest investments that you'll ever have. And so I want to make sure that we're honoring that and we're acknowledging the importance of how big of a key player you are in the neighborhood. But the merchants they're there. And so they'd be the ones who also can promote this because I go into that neighborhood all the time. And so if I was coming from Berkeley neighborhood where I live, I would say, oh, I'll write a letter of support for that. I might not be in the impacted neighborhood, but I can understand how that helps the overall well-being of the north side.
Yeah, great. I'm happy to get involved and to get some other folks buying in. Is there signage, or what is the sort of public facing component of the process?
So this is our first public, but this is it. But what I was thinking we could do is afterwards we could start an email chain with a small group from the West Highland, who their representatives are. Melissa from my staff. I always have my staff CC because I get too many emails and I'm in committee. I drop the ball. And myself and Marshall. We have Marshall's email, and then maybe you two can facilitate. I can host it. We'd have somebody there and then work from there. And then as we are working simultaneously on this, if you all think this is a good project, it sounds like you and Marshall understand the need for this. My staff can build a website on the back end to host on for WHNA and for myself. But we didn't want to do that without being able to have this video even to put on there. We wanted a slide deck to put on there. We wanted a flyer to put on there. Oftentimes when people, when I've done land use in the north side, people get really like, if there's not enough information, they call, and I'm like, so I've always just learned to wait a little bit, have these conversations, put up a website while we're also building the team. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great.
Marshall, does that work for you if we add you to that email?
Absolutely. Yep.
Carl, did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
Andrea, speaking for West Highlands Neighborhood Association, I love the questions that you had, and I really want to thank you for those questions and for being here. One of the early questions you asked is, what kind of reaction are we getting? I think in general, we've gotten a lot of wait and see reaction from the business owners and property owners. As you well know, there's some owners with some very big chunks of 30-second I'm a property owner on 32nd, but I'm not one of the big chunk property owners. In general, the discussions we've had, El Camino and with Grant and others are positive, but very low key. So in working with Carl and Joey and I and the Councilwoman's office, you could be tremendously helpful as Marshall could be. So thank you for that.
Well, yeah, I'd be happy to. Grant is a good friend. And I just wanted to say, Councilwoman Sandoval, thank you for bringing in the trolley slide. So when we first opened the restaurant, in 2012, my grandma was still living at the time, and she used to ride the trolley along 32nd and go dancing at the Trocadero Ballroom.
That's so cool. I
That's
just
so
was
cool.
at the Forney Museum for the stock show, and they have a trolley in there.
Oh, cool.
Yes, it's one of the Denver trolleys, and it was so cool. I think they had the Berkeley stop on there. So if you get a chance to go down to the Forney Museum, stop by. But I think that saving these little nodes like Gaylord, right? Pearl Street, that's all I'm attempting to do is just really be proactive. And you're right, the redevelopment hasn't hit 32nd Avenue as much as it has Tennyson. But now that I've worked on all the accessory dwelling units, it's time to focus back on being proactive on these important commercial nodes.
Yeah, I love it. I appreciate everything you're doing. And I think Tennyson has been a bit of a wake up call to 32nd, just that, I mean, we love how it feels, but it's very different than how it felt 10 years ago. And I think we kind of see that as like a little microcosm of what could go down for us. And it's eye-opening.
Correct.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions or comments? I just want to make sure that I'm respectful of everybody's time. Okay, so for what I have for next steps are Melissa from my office will set up an email with Marshall and yourself and Carl. Bill, would you like to be on that email as well?
That'd be great.
Okay,
Sure.
and then Joey, how about those three? Does that work for you, Carl?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'd add Joey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Carl,
Yeah.
Bill, and Joey? Yep. And myself, and then Andrea and Marshall, if you could just maybe CC some and we can send you the presentation. Just tell us once we start that email chain, what do you need from us? Do you need us to get a venue space? Do you need me to get a time? Probably a time and date, most likely down the road because it's summer and everyone's busy. But we don't want to wait too much on this because we want to be as proactive as keep it moving forward while being respectful of everybody's busy schedules. And then we can go from there. And Melissa on my staff can work with the West Highland Neighborhood Association on a public facing, something now that we have something to put up there. Am I missing anything, Carl?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think these are all great next steps, and we are drawing them not completely from scratch, drawing the map. I mean, the Councilwoman has been through this before and has a lot of great experience to deploy and lessons learned, but the exact route we're going to take yet, at least of these intermediate steps, early and intermediate steps, is yet to be defined completely and is really dependent on Andrea and Marshall, folks like you helping us out. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. And thank you all once again, just to all the volunteers. Like we couldn't do this without you. And Andrea and Marshall, thank you for joining us tonight so we could advance this important conversation. I ran to do this type of work and be able to represent all of you in the neighborhood that I was born and raised in and that I love with everything that I am. So thank you all and have a good evening. We'll be in touch.
Thanks, Amanda. You're
Night
one
all.
of a kind.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.